Often, the history of ideas hands us distorted images, sometimes downright bad caricatures. One of the most persistent is that of Karl Marx as the cold materialist, the dogmatic atheist, whose sole interests were factory numbers, cold economics, and the complete destruction of faith. However, that image is not just incomplete, it's misleading. It's worth doing an archaeological dig into his work to scrape beneath the surface of political economy and uncover the fundamental truths that actually fuel his thought. If we look closely at Marx's writings, we see the deeply interwoven roots of Judaism, the very tradition that gave us the Bible and later Christianity. Of course, Marx's formation was complex. It includes important concepts from thinkers like Hegel, which added vital nuances. The great philosopher Enrique Dussel, who, incidentally, I had the pleasure of studying with in one of his courses, used to declare himself a non-Marxist. Yet, he provides a masterful and profound interpretation of Marxism. Through Dussel's lens, we don't find an enemy of the spirit. We find a kind of secular biblical character. Yes, there is a fierce struggle, but it is not against God, it is against idolatry. To understand this lineage, we must acknowledge Marx's origins. He descended on both sides from a long lineage of rabbis. Although his father converted to Protestantism due to legal necessity, the pervasive anti-Semitism in European society, Marx's intellectual essence remained profoundly Semitic. His structure of thought is not Greek, but Jewish, the same bedrock that eventually gave rise to Christianity. This radically shifts our perspective. Let's start with the diagnosis of human suffering. We all know the famous phrase, "Religion is the opium of the people." It's been used to brand Marx as a cynic, but the full quote, written in his youth, says verbatim that religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world. It is the spirit of a situation stripped of spirit. In Marx's time, opium was medicinal. It was used as a painkiller, a means to rest from pain, including existential pain, though, of course, it carries the risk of misuse. See, for example, the history of the Opium Wars, or the issues with fentanyl today. Seen from this angle, the phrase implies that Marx views religion as a spiritual solace, which is practically true. But this nuance was misunderstood, generating conflicts like those surrounding liberation theology. For many, religion is existential aspirin for a sick world. Perhaps Marx wasn't mocking the believer, he was pitying them. He identifies a genuine spiritual void. For Marx, capitalism has drained the world of its soul. It has disenchanted reality, leaving humanity exposed. His spiritual goal was not just palliative, not just to take the patient's painkiller away, but to cure the cause of the disease so that the patient's health itself made the painkiller unnecessary. This brings us to the concept of alienation, Entfremdung. Marx describes how the worker pours their life, their spiritual essence into the object they fabricate, but the system rips that object away. The man empties out, losing his soul, while the things come alive, like in the story of the golem. The world of objects becomes powerful, and the inner world of the human becomes poor. It is a tremendous existential crisis. This leads us to the centerpiece of our reflection, idolatry. In Judaism, the cardinal sin is not atheism, it is avodah zarah, idol worship, the adoration of objects made by human hands. In his magnum opus, Das Kapital, Marx deploys what Enrique Dussel calls a theological metaphor. Marx describes the fetishism of commodities. He tells us that a wooden table is simple, but when it becomes a commodity, it turns into let's say, a metaphysical object. Marx is railing against the new pantheon erected by modernity. The human being creates money, creates capital, and then kneels before it as if it were a force of nature, ungovernable. We have inverted the sacred order. People are treated as things, and things, the market, are treated as people, with will and whims. Enrique Dussel, after studying Marx's complete works chronologically, concludes that Marx is not truly an atheist. He is an opponent of idolatry, fighting against the golden calf. Dussel highlights how Marx explicitly uses the figure of Moloch, the Canaanite god who demanded child sacrifice, to describe Kapital. The system is not neutral, it is a theological beast that feeds on human life. And this brings us to the most luminous concept Dussel rescues: living labor. Unlike Greek thought, which often scorned manual labor and saw the body as a prison, the Jewish root of Marx sees the human being as an indissoluble unit. We are flesh, animated by spirit, and above all, creators. In Genesis, God works, God creates. Therefore, work is divine. For Marx, the human being realizes himself by transforming nature, which is also God's work. Dussel explains that the creative source of value is the bodily subjectivity of the worker, their living labor, lebendige Arbeit. It is a sacred fire capable of creating something from nothing. The sin of capitalism, the blasphemy, is that it vampirizes this sacred life. It transforms the living blood of the worker into dead labor, into accumulated capital. It is a death liturgy where the human being is sacrificed on the altar of profit. That is why when Marx demands justice, which in the Hebrew tradition is called tzedek, he is not asking for charity. Charity or philanthropy often just whitewash the injustice. Marx, perhaps with prophets like Amos or Isaiah in mind, despises the hypocrisy of those who give alms but maintain the structures of oppression. He demands a structural restitution. He demands that the creator, the worker, not be stripped of their creation, or rather, the fruits of that creation. Finally, let us address hope. It is a concept that, while seeming good, has its own snags, but that is another topic. Marx inherits the linear conception of time from Judaism. Unlike the eternal cycles of other, so-called pagan religions, for Marx, history has a specific meaning and direction, a specific place and time. At the risk of radical oversimplification, his narrative is a kind of secularized messianism. The human being had an original paradise, comparable to primitive communism. Then came the slavery of history and class struggle, comparable to the mythical exile in Egypt, after which one must necessarily head toward a redemption, communism. But this is vital. Like the biblical patriarchs, Marx does not idealize poverty. The promised land is one of milk and honey. Let us recall that all the great patriarchs were rich and lived lavish lifestyles. However, the fact that the biblical patriarchs were wealthy does not imply that Marx modeled his vision of communism on that image. His critique of capitalism was not so much about generating poverty per se, but rather about exploitation and alienation. Marx never preached monastic austerity. His critique is that the current system generates artificial scarcity. His vision of communism is the democratization of wealth, the full deployment of productive forces, so that everyone can enjoy abundance. He wants to restore the dignity of man as the king of creation, not as an ascetic servant. But, of course, there are those to whom this does not appeal. It's worth remembering that this concept is not unique to Marxism. The Aztecs, for example, punished the hoarding of goods with the death penalty. In conclusion, if we read Marx from his roots and take into account Don Enrique Dussel, the image changes completely. First, we see a thinker who, paradoxically, tried to kill the gods in the sky to safeguard the sacred here on earth. We see someone who understood that feeding the hungry is a spiritual act, because the human spirit, the spirit of all of us, also lives in our blood. We see someone who tried to be a prophet in his own land, and who cried out against the idolatry of money to remind us that perhaps the only true creator worthy of reverence and care in this world is the human being itself. That is the living and urgent spirit at the core of Marx's materialism, although, unfortunately, it was formulated in terms too ridiculously overcomplicated, even confusing, and, like the sleep of reason, has also generated its own monsters. But that is another story, and shall be told another time. And remember that the foregoing is one interpretation among many possible. In the meantime, I recommend Enrique Dussel's books, such as Las Metáforas Teológicas de Marx, The Theological Metaphors of Marx, or Filosofía de la Liberación, Philosophy of Liberation. They are published by various presses, although many can also be downloaded for free as PDFs online. I also recommend the series of videos on the universal history of law done by Miguel Ángel Gutiérrez for UNAM. I'll leave the link in the description, particularly the episodes relating to German, Russian, and Chinese law, as well as the book, which is the most concise and engaging you will find, and it's available on Amazon. Share your opinion, whatever it may be. All of them count, in the comments, and we'll see you next time.